Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2020 Thrilling 32.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Final Four of the 2020 Thrilling 32. Danny, the Final Four. Like we said last week, not so sure that this Final Four was that big of a mystery. Maybe a few shockers here and there. But for the most part, we think most of us were able to get here. Now, Danny, here comes the real hard part. We've got some great matchups. We've got some very fierce matchups. Not a lot of gimmies here. What's going to happen?
I have no idea. We've got 8 fantastic coasters left, 4 in the wood, 4 in the steel. A lot of the perennial favorites that we talk about each and every year are back here. A lot of former champions, our 2 defending champions are still in the running here.
Still in the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you look at the wood Final Four, it's the wood Final Four each and every year seems to be the same 3 rides, and then there's sort of a 4th wild card.
Yeah.
We always seem like every once in a while, one of them gets knocked out early, whether it's Voyage or El Toro or, whatever in early rounds, because, El Toro got knocked out pretty early, I think, by the Voyage a couple years ago. But generally speaking, it's Voyage, El Toro, Lightning Rod, and then someone else, right? This year it's Gold Striker. Last year I think we had Phoenix. The year before, the Coaster from Peony Playland was in there. But generally speaking, Voyage, El Toro, Lightning Rod, those 3, I think a lot of people looked at those 3 rides immediately at the selection show and sort of penciled those 3 in to the Final Four and then tried to figure out which one they were going to put in from that other bracket. A lot of people did get Gold Striker. A lot of people put in a ride like Balder, because that was maybe the next highest one historically. But it's always those 3 and then getting that 4th one. The Steel, I think the Steel, on the other hand, I think there were 2 obvious ones with Fury and Steel Vengeance. I think those 2 were pretty obvious. And then the other side was really sort of anyone's best guess, because in the one region you had Untamed, which is here in the Final Four. You had Intimidator 305, which has always been a very, very strong ride. You had Millennium Force, which has had 1 or 2 good years. So it wasn't too far-fetched that might have been a Final Four ride. And then in where we've got Expedition G-Force in the Final Four here, you also had Terran in that region, which has been a top 5 ride. We have Helix, which has been a top 5 ride. That half of the bracket where we've got sort of the European Championship going on in the Steel, wreaked a lot of havoc on people, whereas the Fury Steel Vengeance side, I think, was pretty easy. So really, I think if you look at the Final Four as a whole, we have 8 rides left. I think 5 of them were pretty easy to get, and then the other 3, the people who have 1 or 2, maybe even all 3 of those other 3 correct are the ones that are at the top of the standings here. But it's made for some interesting matchups here in the semifinals to see which ones are going to move on here. In the wood, we've got the Voyage El Toro matchup again that we've seen year after year. And then in the steel, we've got sort of the U.S. Championship on the one side. We've got a European Championship on the other side. And, we're going to get a head-to-head here. And we're seeing a rematch of the Steel Finals a year early this year in Steel Vengeance and Fury.
Well, and let's look at this first matchup here in the wood bracket. The Voyage and El Toro. These are 2 rides that Danny, I'll be quite honest with you here. I don't know if I have anything left to say about these two rides.
Right?
Like you said, this is a matchup we've seen year after year, multiple times throughout the Thrilling 32, sometimes at the end, sometimes somewhere before. These are two rides that find each other quite a bit. I think everyone knows both of our opinions on which ride is the better ride. There's no question that we both prefer Voyage over El Toro. You more than me, but still the answer is the same either way. And I personally don't see anything to change my mind that the answer in this bracket is going to be any different either.
Well, let's and again, if you real quick here, because I brought up for tonight, I brought up the Thrilling 32 history spread.
Oh.
Starting in 2012, I'll read off the previous 7 rankings real quick, rapid fire, from 2012 all the way up to last year in 2018. Voyage, number 2, number 2, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 1, number 1. So it's always been 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
If you look at El Toro, starting in 2012, number 3, number 4, number 3, number 3, number 2, number 2, number 4.
But high rankings, but what's the one difference? El Toro has never been number 1.
It's never won. And of the previous 7, is it 7 years? I think it's 7 years. If you look at the previous 7 years, only once in 7 years has El Toro actually been higher than Voyage.
Really? And what year
once.
was that? What was the? And
that year was 2016 when El Toro was number 2 and Voyage was number 3, and Lightning Rod was our champion that year. So El Toro never won the championship in the 1 year that it was higher than Voyage. So, but if you look at the Final Four, that's a very real possibility right here, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I still don't think that it's going to happen. I still think we got Voyage here going on to our championship to defend for the plate on the title.
That's true. Defending for the spot on the plate. The plate on the belt there. So moving on to the championship. In this year's Wood Thrilling 32, out of this matchup, it will be the Voyage from Holiday World is moving on once again, one step away from another number 1 overall ranking. Not going to be easy. One of those other 2 rides going to try and prevent that. So Voyage 1 win away from being the first ever 3-peat champion in the bracket, Andy. We talked about this last year. We were on the cusp of history last year with Voyage being the first back-to-back. We are on the cusp of history again here, possibly a 3-peat for Voyage.
It would be impressive, but I think the other thing to notice here is outside of Lightning Rod, okay, which and to some extent Outlaw Run, we haven't seen a whole lot of major wood coasters be opened, at least in America. Wood coasters that could be contenders for number 1. Some people say maybe Wildfire, maybe, I don't know. Like you said, we haven't ridden it. So I think the Voyage's dominance thus far is mainly because of the lack of maybe credible wood coasters opening up in the United States.
Yeah, and I think we've had some really good rides open in the past, maybe 4 or 5 years. In terms of wood coasters, Mystic Timbers kind of comes to mind as maybe the best over here, and the refurbishment of Ghost Rider I think certainly needs to be a talking point. But Outlaw Run and Lightning Rod, but those rides are right there. They've won this tournament before, but there really hasn't been that standout that everyone has agreed is definitely better.
And to be honest with you, Voyage is such a dominating ride that has such great ride experience throughout from start to finish that it's going to take something that's almost perfect to knock the Voyage off, I think. Like Lightning Rod has a lot of nice elements, but like we said on the previous show, it's missing some stuff. It's missing something that get me over point. The same thing with Outlaw Run, a fine roller coaster. Mystic Timbers, a fine roller coaster. I love Ghost Rider, but there's parts in it that might meander a bit. There might be a little bit slow. The Voyage, I think, is a complete ride, and that's why we see the dominance here. And the question is now, moving on to our next matchup, which I think this one should be a no-brainer in most people's minds. Gold Striker, Lightning Rod. Obviously, to me, it's Lightning Rod. So I don't think there's any question here. But the question is Voyage going to top Lightning Rod, or are those Lightning Rod people finally going to get their say here again?
Well, and that's the big question here. And maybe if Lightning Rod wasn't a former champion at any point, you would hesitate a little more. But Lightning Rod has done it. And again, we talk about how, you know, there's always that fourth ride that needs to get into the Wood Final Four, and there's always, you know, the way the matchups work, there always seems to be sort of that oddball ride that is still a really nice ride, a top 10, top 8 ride or so maybe, that gets into the Final Four, like your Phoenix, your coaster from PNE. And we've had that before. And this year it's Gold Striker, but it is Lightning Rod moving on to the championship once again. So, Andy, we've got the Voyage Lightning Rod Championship again this year. You know,
now, I'm going to ask a question here, because I think I heard you say something, but Lightning Rod won the championship in 2016, correct?
Yes, it's first year.
And that's my point exactly. How many times have we said that in this poll, the first year of a monster coaster is always its best showing? Always its best showing. And if we're going to see championships be won, like we did with Lightning Rod, it was going to happen in the first year. And then as more people ride that coaster, it gets brought back down to reality. And now I think Lightning Rod is in that reality. Here we have it going up against Voyage once again. And I still go back to the way this poll works. I can't explain it to you. Maybe you can explain why it happens this way. But to me, Lightning Rod isn't going to defeat Voyage because of that first year magic that it had.
No, and I think you make some good points there. You know, there's certainly a lot to look at, I think. But generally speaking, you know, this is going to be another one for the ages, I think. We get the same matchup that we did last year. It is not very often that we see the same matchup in the championship 2 years in a row. We have not seen that very much historically over the course of this tournament. We saw Fury and Expedition G-Force 2 years in a row with 2 different winners. Actually, I think we might have seen that one 3 years in a row. I can't remember if we saw that one 3 years in a row with Fury, G-Force, and then Fury taking it back. I can't remember what our championship matchup was a few years ago. But I'm just going to set the stage for next week's championship with something here. Entering this year, if you look at the overall records in the Thrilling 32 tournament, entering this year, Voyage had an all-time record of 28 wins and 4 losses. Lightning Rod, entering this year, had an all-time record of 12 wins and 2 losses. If I'm reading my math correctly here. So what that means, Andy, is that the winner of next week's matchup will also propel that winner to have the best overall winning percentage in the 8-year history of the Thrilling 32 tournament. Right now, their winning percentages are so close, but whichever one wins this matchup next week will sort of take over the crown of highest all-time winning percentage in head-to-head Thrilling 32 matchups. So a little fun tidbit there for you.
For the Wood side, though.
For the Wood side, yes, yeah. For the Wood side.
Because right now, Steel Vengeance is undefeated. Steel Vengeance is the
right. Well, that's
Thrilling 32.
Yep. Voyage had the slight edge overall in the winning percentage entering this year. So This is fun stuff here. And actually, currently, as it currently stands, if I'm looking at it live right now, Voyage, if you include the 4 victories up to this point this year, it looks like 32-4 for Voyage and 16-2 for Lightning Rod all time, which puts them in a dead heat tie at this very moment for highest winning percentage.
Yeah. It's crazy how that works out sometimes.
Isn't it weird? Like, and every year, and it's going to be different next year, right? But every year we come up with this fun stuff to come up with each and every year, and that would be a little bit different. But remember, in 2017, Lightning Rod actually lost in the semifinals to El Toro, so it didn't get that 4th win that year. So that's sort of that little tidbit from 3 years ago is sort of setting the stage for this again this year. So we've got Voyage and Lightning Rod in the championship again coming up next week. But Andy, you alluded to it just a moment ago. Overall, if you consider both sides of the bracket, we do have a ride that has never lost.
We do.
In the Thrilling 32. And
may never lose, ever.
Actually, Andy, if you want to be honest here, the steel side of the steel bracket actually has 2 current rides that have never lost, because Untamed is the new kid on the block, and Untamed has not yet lost. So
categorically, you are right.
Categorically, we have 2 rides that are undefeated all time. Something's got to give, but
it's the immovable force meeting the what is it? It's the now I forgot what it is. It's the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object.
that might just be, but let's not count our chickens yet, because Untamed still has a matchup to go before it even gets to the championship. I don't even know.
It might find a loss right here early.
It might find a loss right here, Andy. It might be that 3-1 record that we talked about, but we will see. But let's start with our U.S. championship. We've got Steel Vengeance from Cedar Point going up against Fury 325 from Carowinds, a rematch of last year's championship, a matchup of last year's number 1 and number 2, and we're treated to it here in the semifinals. Now, Andy, a lot of people have been discussing this in the comments and, on the Discord and even on Facebook. As we said a couple weeks ago, we know we don't rig these brackets anymore to guarantee the 1-2 matchup in the championship. We did that the first few years to sort of make it more interesting. We don't do that anymore. We let the random list generator sort of do its thing. What are the odds that this is actually our 1-2 matchup again, like it was last year, and we just happen to be seeing it around earlier this year? What are the odds of that being the case right now?
I personally think pretty good at this point. When you look at this, and I'll say this, Danny, even if you did rig it 1-2, you wouldn't have known that because you screwed up the way the brackets went.
Oh, right. That's exactly my point. So that more than anything should be proof. Because people say, oh, they're just saying that. They actually rig it to be 1-2. That more than anything should be proof that we no longer rig these brackets. No. Because I would have rigged it incorrectly.
So who knows what the hell happened here. But Danny, I think you're right. I think there's a very good possibility. Untamed, come on. Untamed, brand new kid on the block. We just got done saying that it's probably going to have its best showing ever this year. No question in my mind. Is that a number 2 showing, though? I don't know. Is Fury still a number 2 ride? Probably in this group. Is Untamed a number 2 ride? I don't know. But there's also not discounting Expedition G-Force, a former champ, being up there as well as a possible number 2 or number 3 ride. So basically, I don't know. That's an excellent question. Is it a number 2 ride? If I had to put money on it, I'd probably say that yes, you are looking at a 1-2 matchup here.
Okay. So now knowing that, and
Steel
if we
Vengeance still wins. So
okay, all right, that's where I was going. That's where I was going next. What are we talk about how rides always do very well in their first year, right? We saw last year Steel Vengeance had the highest point percentage in the history of the Thrilling 32. And I mean, it was still fairly close. Is there any chance that Steel Vengeance has fallen off just that little bit from the first year effect, and that could be enough that Fury actually overtakes it here?
Well, I'll say this. If Steel Vengeance is not the winner of this, then Danny Miller, your poll is wrong. Flat out wrong. So
Well,
you can make your debates about the wood coasters. You can make your debates about what's 2, 3, 5 through 32. But if Steel Vengeance is not number one, flat out wrong.
well, I think that is certainly a reasonable assessment from your standpoint there. So, well, let's find out who's moving on to the championship and who is our United States champion this year. And it is Steel Vengeance from Cedar Point knocks off Fury. 3-2-5.
Pause as if it was in question, Danny.
I paused as if it was in question. But
You fooled
boy,
not a single person on this video.
Steel Vengeance knocks off Fury again. So boy, this is fun.
To beat the man, you got to beat the man, not continually kick him in the head too.
Well, no, that's very true. Now, Andy, let's talk about our two European contenders.
Oh, now this one.
Now this, unlike I think the other three matchups we've talked about tonight, this one, I think, certainly has the most volatility just because of the unknown of Untamed. The fact that both of these rides were ridden heavily by the group that we went over to Europe with this year. So obviously they've both done very well. Have they shifted amongst each other? I mean, Untamed is brand new, so we have no real starting point. You mentioned the fact a couple times already that rides tend to do very well their first year and then fall off a little bit. But again, I'm looking at Expedition G-Force here, and we know that Expedition G-Force has won a championship in the past, has been higher than Fury 325 in the past. So it's possible that Fury 325 maybe isn't the number 2 coaster. I think sitting here, not knowing any better, the assumption would be that Steel Vengeance is possibly your number 1 again, and Fury was your number 2, and maybe you put Expedition G-Force at number 3, like it was last year. Those are your 1, 2, 3, and then maybe Untamed is somewhere in that 4 to 6 range. I think that's kind of the assumption that everyone's working off of here right now. But knowing that, and knowing that Expedition G-Force has been higher than Fury in the past, what are the chances that Expedition G-Force might be your number 2 coaster here, and Fury might be, say, your number 3?
Danny, I'm not going to sit here and even discount the idea that Untamed could be the number 2 coaster here as well.
Well,
Simply based on everything we've said thus far, that rides are going to do best in their first year. This matchup here, if you got this far, has got to be one of the toughest choices in the entire Thrilling 32, because there's so much going on here. There's Untamed, you guys having ridden it, so we know that it has a valid ranking at some point, that a lot of people got on it this year. We had a lot of European voters come in having ridden that ride. So it probably has a pretty sizable ridership, if I was to just take guesses at what the poll says. Mm-hmm. And then you had you guys going out there to ride Expedition G-Force. This is one of those that's a toss-up. I just don't know how it's going to go. My gut feels that it's Expedition G-Force. That it being 3 last year, you guys having ridden it this year, having had favorable things to say about it. We went through the whole math a few weeks ago about how, if I put in my top 10, it'll probably help the ride, that whole rigmarole. So I feel like Expedition G-Force would be the winner here.
Well, and I'll say this, far more people having Expedition G-Force in the championship than Untamed. Because keep in mind, a lot of people even have Untamed out of the first round.
Exactly.
And there are some people who had Terran over Expedition G-Force in this matchup.
Well, you talk about getting here.
Both of these rides are battle tested. I mean, Untamed has beaten Intimidator 305 and Millennium Force. Millennium Force also knocked off Smiler, which was very strong last year. Expedition G-Force, maybe even more battle tested. It knocked off a very solid Phantom's Revenge ride, I think, in the first round. It knocked off Terran in the last round, which it was also in the same region as Helix. I mean, both of these rides have deserved to be here tonight.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt about that. Oh man! But this is a flip of the coin here. This is a flip of the coin. It really is.
Yeah, I can tell that you're conflicted here.
Well, and the other problem is I have nothing to really go off on here because when I selected my brackets, I thought they were built the correct way, and so my final four was all screwy. Because I didn't actually have these two matchups. I had the Fury.
Well, you didn't pay attention.
Well, yeah, sorry. I did not think people built brackets in that way. I didn't even know that was an option. So I was picking Steel Vengeance G-Force. That was an easy pick. And I was picking Fury Untamed. Let's talk about that matchup.
Right? Well, yeah, let's talk about that one for a minute.
because I'll tell you what. I picked it and I said, you know what the hell? This became a lot easier for me. Steel Vengeance clearly is better than Expedition G-Force. And I said, there's no way in hell Untamed is beating Fury 325. So I picked Fury 325. I had Fury and Steel Vengeance in my final with Steel Vengeance winning. So, you look at it from that perspective.
Well, and that's what you ended up going off of in our discussion right here is you believe that we've seen the 1-2 matchup already.
I think we have. So, but the question it still remains is how do you pick this one? And I just don't know. It's a flip of the coin.
All right. Well, are you ready to find out who it is?
I suppose so.
All right. Well, moving on to the championship in this year's Steel Thrilling 32 bracket, and settling the debate for now, for at least this year, on the best steel coaster in Europe, it is Untamed from Walibi Holland, knocking off the Pride of Germany and Expedition G-Force. Andy, RMC versus RMC, Steel Vengeance versus Untamed is your championship next week. Now, before you say anything, everything you've been saying about why you've been sticking with Untamed up until this point, all of a sudden, do you maintain that logic? Could Untamed pull off this upset next week?
I tell you what, it would be the heist of the century. Is what it would be.
Think about it. Outlaw Run, champion in its first year. Fury 325, champion in its first year. Lightning Rod, champion in its first year. Steel Vengeance, champion in its first year. You want to know something that all of those champions have in common? Well, we don't know about Steel Vengeance yet, but the previous ones before Steel Vengeance, none of them won the second year.
You're right.
Outlaw Run didn't win in its second year after it won its first year. Fury 325 lost to Expedition G-Force. Lightning Rod lost to Voyage in its second year. Well, actually, Lightning Rod lost to El Toro in the round before or whatever it was, and Voyage ended up being the champion. So now history is actually on Untamed side for a minute here because they're both undefeated. So you can't, even though Steel Vengeance is the defending champion, there is an argument that says that history is on Untamed side here all of a sudden.
I'm not going to contest that. You raise valid points.
People are pulling their hair out right now.
But in doing so, Danny Miller, by raising these valid points, if this truly does come to pass, that means
you got to get on a plane to go to Holland.
No, that means you are completely wrong. That's what that means. That means that the voters got it wrong.
As you kindly pointed out to me on the phone a couple weeks ago, you said you've been describing Untamed as Steel Vengeance. Yes. It's just smaller. Yeah. Well, if it's basically a smaller Steel Vengeance, how could it be better than the bigger version?
Danny, I'm going to pull out some Thomas Paine for you. Okay, Thomas Paine, common sense, baby. Nowhere in nature is the bigger item worse than the satellite, than the smaller version. That the satellite revolves around the Earth. The moon revolves around the Earth because the Earth is bigger. Untamed is not better than Steel Vengeance. It's smaller. It doesn't make any sense. It goes against nature. It goes against the founding of America. Damn it.
Oh, man. And I'll tell you what, personally myself, Steel Vengeance, still the better ride. No question. Absolutely. I don't think there's to me, the only ride that can really touch Steel Vengeance to me is Voyage, but we don't have a combined bracket. Not yet. We don't. Maybe one day, but not yet. So, boy, oh boy. This is fun. I mean, Steel Vengeance, you and I had that legendary media day together, Steel Vengeance a couple years ago. Untamed being my 700th coaster, a milestone ride, certainly holds, even though it is an excellent ride all by itself, holds a special place in my heart as a milestone. Boy, oh boy. I want people to comment below just what they're thinking right now. And I would be interested in knowing, with all the facts that we've presented here tonight, I'd be interested in knowing if people got to pick just this one matchup based on everything we've presented, how many people would stick with Steel Vengeance? Because, spoiler alert, almost everybody who submitted a bracket has Steel Vengeance winning their Steel bracket. And I think that's the right decision when you're...
Now, the question is, does anyone have Untamed winning?
Let me look at the sheet. Nobody has Untamed winning.
Well, there you go.
We've got one.
At least the people filling out brackets have sense.
So we've got one Expedition G-Force, we've got one Maverick, and we've got two Fury 325s. Everyone else is Steel Vengeance.
Well, I have nothing else left to say until next week. So
and spoiler alert, the one person who picked Maverick to win was not Rob Dole.
Oh.
Yeah. Real quick, let's look real quick at the standings. Moving in, and again, we've had some people ask us this. We are not showing what people have picked as their champions as we have in past years, just because I think that's a little more interesting and a little bit more tense, because now you don't know who above you or who below you might have what picked. We do have some differing of champions picked in the top group of people. So even if you are not in first place or second place, third place, whatever, here after this round, that does not necessarily mean that you are out of it just yet. Our leader after 4 of 5 rounds here is Mr. Michael White, sitting in first place with 131 points and 56 picks correct. So a nice job out of Michael there so far. Lots of people having both of our finalists correct here. In second place, Mark Kevin Umlor, one of our friends over there from Europe, sitting in second place. Andy in third place. My mom sitting there with 127 points, sitting third place for Becky Miller. How about that? And Andy in a dead heat tie for third with my mom. One Rob Dole.
Oh, Rob Dole, even after disastrous pick.
Even after not selecting Maverick, Rob Dole still has a chance to win next week.
That's a travesty. That can't happen.
We've got some. We've still got some of the Patreon folks who are doing rather well. Jeff Goodman, Water Parker, Andy. You once you had the correct format of bracket, you actually had both sets of finalists correct. You've moved all the way up to 15th, good sir.
Well, and I don't even know wood coasters. Most of the 32 wood coasters that were on that sheet, I've never even heard of before. So that's with having zero knowledge too.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong there. Let's see some more people that we like to give shout out to. Some more patron people. Brad Crow sitting in 28th. Defending champ Jackson Miller 32nd. Still having a good year. Probably not in contention to win it with 111 points, but having Untamed losing to Intimidator 305 in the first round was sort of the big downfall.
That's the death knell for many.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and certainly you can't blame anyone for having that one wrong. Definitely. Let's see. Who else do we have? The impartial Brian Bass has moved up to 67th with 104 points, having both wood finalists correct, but only one on the steel side. And there's a lot of people who had 1 out of 2 on the steel side, and pretty much all those people are the folks who those are the folks who did not have Untamed. Most of them having Terran or Expedition G-Force, or some of them having Intimidator 305 on the other side of the bracket. Who else are we looking for here? My dad 1 out of 2 in both, down to 102nd, and Aunt Sue 2 out of 2 on the wood, 1 out of 2 in the steel, 104th, so she's moved up a bit. Let's see who else. Stephen Lynn 121st.
Stick to Cedar Point, right?
What's that?
Stick to Cedar Point, right?
Well, I guess that's maybe the logic here. Who else do we have? Alex Baker sitting in 75th. Trying to find some more of the Patreon people.
How about Rob Polk?
Oh, Rob Polk. Let's see. Rob Polk, 52nd with 107 points. Now, it's his son is Alex, right?
Mm-hmm.
His son Alex in 30th with 112. So son trouncing father in that matchup so far. Boy, we've got a lot of good brackets. Adam the Beard Man always does pretty well, sitting in 22nd. We've got a lot of people with some good scores.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about that is we said at the outset that we thought in general, before we got the brackets in, we thought in general that the scores would be lower this year. And I don't know how has that turned out here so far.
We did. So if we do the math, if you get both champions correct, you get 16 for each, and then the 2 bonus points. So you end up getting 36 points total. So if Michael White, who I won't say who he has selected, I won't say who anyone has selected here. If Michael White gets both champions correct, that would be 36 points. Added to his 131 would be 167, which would be a new record. If you remember last year, Jackson, my brother, had 164, which is currently the all-time record. So if Michael White gets both champions right next week, would set an all-time record. Mark Kevin Omlor is currently sitting in second place, is at 128. So if Michael does not get both right, but Mark Kevin Omlor does, he would end up as the champion with 164 points, which would match last year's total. Those are the only 2 people who have an opportunity to tie or surpass the record. Now, if both of those people end up having one or both of the champions wrong, then it gets a little more interesting, because my mom and Rob Dole, who are in a tie for third, have the same point total and the same number of picks correct. So even though they would not set an all-time record if they had both right, we would actually, for the first time ever, have to go to the tiebreaker to determine our champion. So and this year the tiebreaker
was the tiebreaker question, did you correctly pick Maverick?
Well, you know what? We might have to disqualify Rob Dole just for that. But so there is some opportunity. And then Brad Dugan in 5th has 125. Sam Weaver with 123. Jeff Goodman, Water Parker, Drew Fisher, all with 121. So there's lots of people who mathematically, if the people ahead of them have at least one pick wrong next week. Mathematically, there are lots of people who still have a chance to win.
And Danny, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm still in this game too. To
117. I mean, what's 117 plus 36? I mean, that comes out to
hold on, 36. Where do you get 36 from? Get 50 when Raptor wins, and I get the bonus points for picking a ride that wasn't even in the list.
Oh, well, now what's interesting, you're at 117, but you only have 49 picks correct, and you're tied with a couple other people who have 117 who have 55 and 54 picks correct. So that first round is really kind of hurting you there, where you only had 10 out of 16 right in the wood.
Well, it's people pretending like wood coasters matter.
But I'll tell you, the big thing that's hurting you is having Phoenix in the Final Four.
Which is a travesty that it's not.
Well,
it's a far better coaster than Gold Striker.
Well, no, because that was in the El Toro bracket, if you remember. And but it stands.
The point stands, Danny Miller.
The point does stand. Absolutely, it does. Phoenix is much better than El Toro. I don't care what the hell you people say. So, anyways, any final thoughts? Voyage Lightning Rod, I think, was the matchup that a lot of us expected coming into this tournament a month ago when we started. There are not that many people that I think expected to see Steel Vengeance Untamed in an RMC, in a global RMC battle.
No.
Steel Championship, which, boy, there's all sorts of storylines we can talk about. We'll talk about them a little bit next week. But we talked a lot about them tonight. But, boy, there's some interesting stuff to talk about. And next week we find out our champions. We find out the bracket contest winner. And, of course, we get to finally see the top 50 rankings to see ultimately where all of these rides ranked overall in the top 50, see which rides did very well and just were victims of bad matchups, which rides maybe didn't rank that well, but were benefits of maybe some favorable matchups against lower rides. We always have a few of those every year. And we get to see the 33 through 50. We get to see which rides just barely missed out on being in the Thrilling 32 this year.
Absolutely. So we will look forward to next week, which is probably our second most favorite episode of the year, where we reveal all that great stuff. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, right, Warriors.
See you next week, guys.